People really want a quick solution to make their weaknesses strengths. And I think you have to slow down a little bit and realize that your weaknesses are only weaknesses in some contexts, and your strengths are only strengths in some contexts.
Hi everyone, Ivana Taylor here, and I want to welcome you to the Monday edition of Bizapalooza Chat. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today because when small businesses fail, there are lots of excuses. Now, sometimes we like to call them reasons, but often that's exactly what they are. They're excuses. So on today's show, we're going to talk and help you go beyond the reasons and excuses and transform how you see yourself and your business. So let's begin with a few questions. First, are you overwhelmed by all the things that are swirling in your world today? Would you like to have less frustrating conversations? And are you ready to laugh and stress less while creating a real change in your world and your business? Now, if you answered yes to any of these questions, you are in luck. But if you answered no, you're in a state of denial. And our guest today has been stirring up difficult conversations for over a decade, performing as a stand-up comic, speaking on stage as a diversity educator, and moving teams from abstract to action. She's a member of the National Speaker Association and is a certified speaking professional. Now, only fewer than 10% of speakers worldwide hold this credential, so listen up. Now, when she's not traveling the country, she's spoiling her Pug Lab mix Leo and listening to Johnny Cash cover bands. It's perfect for our show today. Helping us become the change we want to be, please join me in welcoming from Eureka, California, speaker, educator, and would-be vegan if it weren't for peanut butter chocolate milkshakes. You know the rest. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Pettit. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so happy that you are here. So Jessica, let's get down and dirty. Why do small business owners have such a hard time differentiating their businesses?
What's interesting, I think, about differentiation is that we simultaneously have to be able to fit into a category so that someone can find us. And then inside that category have to differentiate as to why we're different or better or a better fit for the things in the same category. So we have to do both at the same time. I think that's why it's a struggle is as a professional speaker, I don't want to be thought of when someone's like, I need a new dishwasher, right? So like, I have nothing to do. I don't even have a dishwasher. I married one, right? Like that's it. I put the dishes away. The dishes magically get clean. I have nothing to do with the dishwasher in my life at all. So I have to make sure that that doesn't happen. But then within professional speakers, well, who's that? Well, there's price ranges and topics and audiences and experience, and I use a lot of humor. And sometimes that's not the best fit for some folks, so I can make referrals to other people. And as we get narrower and narrower and narrower, I get the work that's the best fit for me.
So, you know, there's been this prevailing conversation out in the world about whether you should build on your strengths or work on your weaknesses. Where do you fall in this conversation?
It's funny is that when I was writing my book, that came up a lot, and people really want a quick solution to make their weaknesses strengths. And I think you have to slow down a little bit and realize that your weaknesses are only weaknesses in some contexts, and your strengths are only strengths in some contexts. So both need your attention, and then you actually can control for which context you're in so that you're leaning towards your strengths to be more successful, but you're improving and focusing on what doesn't fit in that context too.
I think that's my favorite answer to that question, Jessica, because you can't just, remember that old Strength Finders book where they were like, build on your strengths. And I can recognize in myself that I've, probably lost a few years while I was trying to fix my weaknesses, but I love your balanced answer on that. So what is your process for building on strengths? I think you cover that in your book.
Yes. So I think it's really important to take responsibility for how you are, right? So let's just pretend we're all strengths, right? There are definitely things that are super annoying about us and that we are incapable of doing, but like, who wants to focus on that? So I start off by really paying attention to the patterns of other people who frustrate me. So maybe one of my weaknesses is that I get really frustrated by people who are not including other people in the group. Like I watch people, like their body will shift to cut someone out of a conversation, drives me nuts. So then I purposely are like, hey, looks like we forgot to bring Jeff into the conversation, right? Which also probably annoys people. But if you can pay attention to the patterns of what you're annoyed in other people, what they're doing is probably a strength that you don't have. And it could be a strength that you notice that that thing is not happening, and that's why it's frustrating. In the same example.
I love that, because one of my favorite phrases is a complaint is a commitment in disguise, right?
Sure.
So like I have this thing about time. I notice you probably noticed I have this thing about like wanting things a certain way, so that like you overdo it, right? So how would I work with that? Is that a strength or a weakness?
Yes. So, right? So there are times where, like, I think about a story a friend of mine shares. It was a workout junkie and really, really, really likes to work out, etc. And her best friend was going into labor. And she needed to know, she asked the best friend's doctor, when is the baby going to be delivered? And they're like, well, it kind of depends, but probably in the next 2 hours or so. And so my friend was like, oh, okay, great. Left the hospital to go on a quick 30-minute run. And of course, the baby was delivered while she was gone. Like, it is exciting to be punctual. That works out great for like transportation, things like this, bills, memory, things like that. That's great. And there are other times where it's not an applicable skill. It doesn't matter how strong it is.
Now, one of the things I really love about your background is how you bring humor into some of these conversations. What role does humor play in all of this?
Because I talk specifically about every topic my grandmother said you're never supposed to talk about, those are really only the topics I talk about. I find that humor is the great equalizer. It allows your opinions and my opinions both to be completely valid, and in the middle is a place for us to kind of laugh together. And as we laugh together, even if we're diabolically opposite in a particular opinion, we can still laugh together about something. It might not be that topic, it might be something else. But if we laugh together, there's a mutual respect that has to happen in order to share that laughter. And you may not notice it at the beginning of the laughter, but during or after, there's this like energy of like, that was fun. Oh, back to hating you, right? So then you can go another level deeper. So I think humor is imperative for the work that I do.
So talk about what you see in the world of small businesses and maybe how they can implement some of the things you talk about to really make a difference in their business and their life.
What they can do to make a difference?
Or maybe I should ask who they could be. What are some of the things that you talk about, whether it's building on your strengths, eliminating excuses, bringing some humor in? What are some things or ways that they can take what you've talked about today and really make it real for themselves?
Sure. So I'll pick up on the excuses piece primarily because of the way you opened the show. So when I read, there's 4 great books out there. So Difficult Conversations, Fierce Conversations, Crucial Conversations, and Courageous Conversations. And when I read all of them, they very much had kind of a self-awareness, how do you talk kind of mode to them. And then at some point it flips into how is the person you're trying to talk to talking so that you can adjust accordingly to get your way. There's a way of doing that that can feel really manipulative. And so I didn't want to do that in my book at all. So what I did in mine is I created a model to be able to understand how you're most likely out of habit to respond to conflict or difference, etc. And then there's this concept of the third rail. So there's 3 different variables. 2 of them tend to be your habitual way of responding. And then this other one kind of dangles. And the third rail, I named it after the subway, and that the third rail is the thing you can't touch because it will electrocute you, but it also powers the entire system. So when doing strengths and weakness kind of work, especially on yourself, possibly giving some space and grace to someone else, I advise noticing the pattern of their or your excuses, because those excuses also are the flip of what will power you through really difficult situations. So for example, my excuses almost always come from not mattering or feeling like a fraud or like, I don't understand. But like, you can motivate me to do almost anything by telling me that my work is connected to something significantly larger than me. So if I'm overwhelmed by the larger, I'll stop. And if I'm connected to the larger, I'll go. That's where my excuses and my motivation come from, the third rail.
I really like that. Now, one of the things that we're talking about in the chat is about superpowers. How did you discover yours, and how do you advocate that small business owners discover and understand their superpower?
I think the best way to do it is to really listen. Everybody around you knows what your superpower is. And if you can tap into that, then it doesn't even feel like work. So I think specifically about like board service or community service or volunteer work that I do. I have a very strange set of skills with limited amount of time. I travel for a living, et cetera, et cetera. But if you know that my skills, like for example, people don't necessarily think this about me, but I'm like a bylaw wonk, right? So like when I join a board, the first thing I do is memorize the bylaws, but look for inconsistencies and then pass amendments to make those make it consistent, because you can't have things that disagree with each other in your own bylaws. Most people don't even read the bylaws, let alone like really think about them, right? So again, fun at parties, but really helpful in that particular context. So my superpower is reading through policy and noticing how an organization actually does run, documenting that and getting all the governing documents in line, right? Not helpful in every occasion, but good. I didn't even know this was something I was good at until I had done it probably 10 or 15 times. And now I can like advertise that, or more importantly, other people will be like, you know who should do this? We need Jessica Pettit, because it's some weird superpower I have. I also can fold a fitted sheet, which I think is connected to bylaws.
I think that is a very useful skill, believe me, right? Now, let's end the show here with like a maybe 100,000 mile high view. When we're talking about strengths in general, we've been talking about individual strengths. I'm kind of curious about your point of view, since you are such a people observer. What do you think are strengths that are truly being called for in the world today?
I don't want to cop out. I really want to answer your question, but I think everything is being called for. It's just a different context. And so overall, and I this on Twitter as well, is that the sense of compassion, I think, is something that we forget because we're looking externally for strengths. Like, I'm really good at bylaws. Well, I'm really good at laundry. I'm really good at this. But compassion is internal. And I think that we often can get it confused with empathy or sympathy. But overall, I would say all of us, me included, could work on our sense of compassion for others, those in our inner circle and those we will never meet.
I can't think of a better way to end the show. Jessica Pettit, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your great new book. Where can we find your book? How do we get it?
Sure. The book is called Good Enough Now, Doing the Best You Can with What You Got Some of the Time. You can get it at goodenoughnow.com, or you can go to Amazon, etc. And if you're interested, goodenoughnow.com/freebies, FREEBIES, has a bunch of videos and downloads and handouts and activities and a survey and things like that you can do for free.
Jessica, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate having you.
Absolutely. Thank you.